Hi, I'm Sonia Haskins, and I am the VR esports editor for VR Fitness Insider. I do a lot of work with VR communities, and I'm here today with Chris Norris to talk about how we can build VR communities and what that really means. So can you introduce yourself, Chris?
Absolutely. Thanks, Sonia. My name is Chris Norris, and I'm the head of the community experiences for AR VR at Oculus. So what that really means is that I focus on helping to not only create meaningful connections to our products and experiences, but also thinking about how we are really connecting with advocates for not only what we're doing in Oculus, but for VR at large.
Yeah, that's great. Well, thanks so much for agreeing to meet with us today for the summit. And let's start out, just jump right into it. Tell me, what do you think about VR community? What actually makes a positive community, and specifically a positive VR community?
Absolutely. The cornerstone of any positive community is building a foundation of trust. A trust that, as a developer, your users and advocates can believe what you say when you say it, that you're looking out for their best interests, and really that there is a degree of transparency. Really, ultimately, at the end of the day, it's about that positive two-way communication, right? So for the most part, people don't want to feel like they're being spoken to. Want to feel like that it's a really positive two-way dialogue, one based on mutual respect, some of that transparency, which I talked about, but also just an ability to enable that meaningful engagement as well.
And with trust, I think you have a sense of you want your developers and the people in your community to be real. And so what does that mean exactly? Like, what does it mean to be real? Should we feel the freedom to be ourselves in VR? And I don't mean, like there's a certain anonymity with the internet, but also with VR, we can change our skins and we can be in there, but it still shows more like this body language. When I go in VR, people know I use my hands a lot. And so what does that mean in context of the community when people are actually being more themselves?
That's a great question. One thing that I think is really important, especially when we're talking about VR and the idea of presence, and it's a lot different than just chatting on a message board, is people really need to feel a sense of authenticity about what they're bringing to that particular VR experience. That said, though, as a developer, it's important to establish ground rules for the types of behavior and the types of social norms that you can expect within the confines of that community, right? So I think it is bring your authentic self, but make sure that you are being respectful to other people in the space. I think that there's a wide latitude for people to really be able to, whether it's expression, whether it's avatar customization, whether it's the types of experiences that you can explore and ultimately create. VR is offering such a wide variety of those right now, and we're excited to see those growing. At the same time, though, there need to be those very clear ground rules for that positivity, of interaction and engagement.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And, I've talked a lot about this and very, very firmly believe in social standards in VR. And I always use the example of the grocery store. If you shouldn't do it in a grocery store, you probably shouldn't be doing it in VR. And so, it's just kind of a good basic rule. And we're not talking about in context of the purpose of the game or experience or something, but we're talking about just your basic interaction, how you go up to people and introduce yourself or talk to them and stuff. So can you talk just a little bit about social standards in VR? And when people hear that we might have the idea of social standards, some people kind of go ballistic and they're like, oh, you can't tell me what to do or whatever. But really, that's not exactly what we're doing. We're just trying to have some basic standards. So can you address that just a little bit?
Yeah, it's interesting that has become somehow conflated with censorship, because really at the end of the day, what we're saying is just be good to one another. One of the things, and you and I have talked about this quite a bit, is the importance of really underscoring the fact that all of the people that you see, or the various avatars that you see, are real people, right? There are actual people in headset behind those avatars. Therefore, we want to make sure that we're behaving accordingly, right? It's different than, say, your traditional video game where some might be non-player characters, some might be, AI, right? It really, the people that you come across in any number of experiences across the platform in VR will be people. So just making sure that there is just at minimum a foundation of respect, but more importantly, just a really cool vehicle for people to engage in this really new medium.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I always try to tell people, remember the human behind the headset, because we've developed this mentality with flat gaming that it's okay to do certain things, and we won't even name those things, but it's okay to do that because you're looking at that action or that behavior on a flat screen.
Yeah.
But people need to realize and recognize when you're in VR, that is like it's your physical body. You're so immersed, it feels like actions are being done to you. Or when someone's in your face calling you names and stuff, it's very, very personal. It's not like someone typing it in a chat, which is not polite and really shouldn't happen, but at the same time you delete it and discard it. But when that's happening to you face to face, it's very disconcerting. And I think it sets a poor standard for how people think it's okay to behave in physical reality. And so if we can set the standard for a better behavior in virtual reality, then possibly that could carry over to our physical behaviors. And so, that's something for everybody to maybe consider, you think?
Absolutely, without a doubt. And that's certainly not to minimize the impact of harassment, say, across 2D services like a message board or something like that.
Yeah.
But, absolutely, that it's a much more visceral reaction, again, due to that sense of presence I was talking about earlier, when, somebody is in your face, or it feels like somebody is crowding your space. All of that starts to feel really uncomfortable. And so I think being able to underscore, not only to help to educate people, hey, there's this sense of presence, so you just need to be aware of people in space, but also to the earlier point, just making sure that we're setting up boundaries for mutual respect.
Right. Yeah, that's great. So, in setting things up, how would you recommend that VR developers or community builders, people who are interested in helping these communities grow, how can we do that in such a way that we actually set a firm foundation from the beginning and help the communities grow from the ground up to be a positive place that people where they want to interact and be engaged and actually return there on a regular basis? How can we do that, and how can we encourage community builders and developers to do that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think the approach in the first instance is twofold. One is decide early on what sort of community you want engaging in your game or experience. That's critical to come to agreement on what it is that you want to build. And then, the second is making sure that you're providing for that, very clear articulation of what that means. And then you're modeling the behavior that you want to see, not only in the game, but via various own channels. So your Twitter feed, if you're working with Reddit moderators, all of that lends itself to that initial sense of what's the tone and tenor of the community that people are joining. And that's, so critical, because, if it does turn in a way that you don't want it to, whether it's more toxic than you want it to, it's really hard to recapture some of that from the first instance. So I would say that that's so important foundationally. And the second is really understanding and being as present as you can across as many platforms, just to understand where do the advocates for your gamer experience reside, and what sort of things are they talking about. As communities grow, interestingly, the value of one-to-one engagements with some of these advocates up front becomes all the more important, right? Because they will also help you to be your culture setters. So establishing those relationships, those open lines of communication with people, and that really aligns with the transparency I was talking about before. And then further, just really thinking thoughtfully about design as well, right? Because we know so much of behavior is really predicated on the design of the experience, or the design of the game, and then just better understanding what are the unintended consequences that come about on the back of the experience within the context of the game itself. And are you really, providing for those respectful boundaries from top to bottom?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And a couple of things to add to your talking about being across various social platforms, setting the same standard across the social platforms. So like, you don't want to allow disrespect, let's say people attacking someone based on race or age, gender, whatever, on your Discord platform, but yet your code of conduct in game, for example, says maybe that's not allowed, which it shouldn't be allowed. But so you want to make sure your standards, I think, are the same across the board.
Yep.
And then the other thing is, as far as setting that up from the beginning, from the front end and then moving forward, if you have a game where you don't have the proper tools in place, you can't add those. But it's good for these developers to realize they can build their game from the beginning with tools in place. And so mention some of the tools that are out there. I'm aware of these. Let's see how many you can name. I'll see if I can add any that you don't list. Yeah, I didn't tell you this question. I just thought of it.
In terms of moderation tools or?
In terms of tools that a user can use, because we're getting a lot of questions from users complaining and saying, for example, there's nothing I can do about this bad situation, so I'm just not going to play. Well, that's not true. Most games actually do have quite a few tools, and they're just not aware of them. So this is a quiz on you, Chris. I just want to know what tools you're aware of.
Well, no. So for me, I think that I would like to look at it along two different lines. So one is, my sense is a little, we tend to place the onus on the people who are being abused to self-remediate. So whether that's block, mute, report, any of those tools that hopefully are embedded within design, where there should be really good system to explain the availability of those tools up front. To the earlier point about transparency, people should understand that if I report or block or mute, there's something that's happening on the back end to flag this user so they can't potentially continue some of that bad behavior, because I need to feel safe in the space and I need to feel empowered to know that I can actually do something about it, that the developer or publisher will assist me with. So, just making sure that all of those are available to the earlier point, because of the fact that some of that is so visceral in VR. On the other side of the coin, I want to make sure that we're not over rotating to the stick, that we're still providing some of that carrot as well. So what are the ways in which we can really think about rewarding good behavior? How do we make that a part of the overall community flow? How do we make that a part of the in-game or in-experience reward mechanics? So people really understand, hey, at the end of the day, if I behave well, there's going to be some reward for me here. I think we know anecdotally that the number of toxic people in any game or experience is a relatively small percentage compared to the whole, but we know that the impact that it has is outsized to the number of people. So making sure that we, don't over rotate to that, relatively small but toxic percentage, and making sure that we're really thinking about, like, how do we give voice to that other, 95% of the player base that we won't necessarily hear from.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I kind of threw that one in on you, but I will tell you, I think that VR in general, and Oculus in particular, has done a good job of trying to create games and experiences with the ability to mute or block or ghost. They've given tools there for people to use. Sometimes those are just for a sense of security. It's not like they're really necessary in all cases. It's just some people want to use them for various reasons. Sure. And, sometimes, like, for example, mute. I play with a lot of guys who, let's say they're playing late at night and their families are in bed. So they'll mute themselves, and sometimes they have to mute other players because, they can't interact with them. So they just do that. It just depends. People have different circumstances. You just don't know the circumstances. All tools we use aren't for something, quote, bad. Right. And then on the credit side, you're exactly right that most of this stuff, when you see something that's very toxic, it's a small percentage of the population, but unfortunately the instances are so harsh and harmful that it ends up being very visible, which is just so sad. And I can tell you from personal experience, it's very impactful to you to have those experiences, because you're like, why do people have to behave this way? But the the positive reinforcement to that is that if you report those people, the worst ones, then there is action taken. So I think you do feel empowered by that. And I always tell guys and gals on the Discord, learn to ignore people, learn to mute them, have a lot of grace, because you never know if someone's just having a bad day or, being a little bit angry or things like that. That's not really necessarily toxic. It's just, we're human and we can be in a bad mood sometimes, and we can say things we shouldn't sometimes. But when you encounter the people who are truly being awful, you're going to know it. Those are the ones that we need to have out of the ecosystem until they can learn to behave like decent human beings. So
it's a really great point, and kind of what we were talking about earlier in terms of really making that the entire experience feel welcoming and accessible, right? I mean, it really starts with all of us and the example that we want to set as well. So it's incredibly important. I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, raise the bar. Be the person that you want the world to see. All right, let's go into the next question. We had discussed talking about forming groups within VR communities. And now what's really exciting, and we've seen this, is the communities are growing so much now that we have the Quest available to really get a lot more people into the ecosystem, that we're starting to see more subgroups or whatever. You know, you have people who want to play with other parents, or people who want to play with other 30-year-olds, or whatever it is. I mean, you just have different groups, and that's great. It's fun to see that, and people find their friends and stuff. And so what do you think about that? And do you think it's a good thing? Do you think it's a bad thing? How would we proceed with that in such a way that it does promote inclusion rather than exclusion, while at the same time allowing people to have the friends that they choose to have?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question, and one we need to be thoughtful of as we grow the ecosystem as a whole. I think, one of the things that I said initially in terms of my role is thinking about how do we create meaningful connections, not only to content, but with people themselves within VR. And so, being able to come into VR with people that and experience a whole new, something entirely new within the context of VR really helps to solidify those relationships, and is something that cannot be replicated anywhere else. So especially given where we are right now under shelter-in-place rules, to be able to really connect with far-flung relations in ways that you could not have because of the VR platform, I think is incredible. At the same time, we want to make sure that it is relatively easy or easier to make those meaningful connections for people that you don't know. Part of the on-ramp in VR is just being social and engaging with people and communicating in ways that would feel natural out of headset, but don't necessarily once you're in the headset itself. So, I want to make both of those true in ways that feel relatively seamless, right? So it's easy for me to go in, find people with shared interests, and make new friendships, meaningful connections, as I would anywhere else. But also, hey, if I want to connect with a group of friends, so I live in California, I have a friend who lives on the East Coast, I have another friend who lives in Canada, can we connect relatively easier? And it feels that we have that sense of presence, that we're hanging out in a social application, or we're in big screen watching a movie together. I want to make sure that we have all of that in place as well to enable those connections.
Do you hear the rooster?
I do hear the rooster.
Okay, this is the fun of recording Summit talks at home. So, sorry about the rooster, everyone.
Oh.
So I was actually thinking while you were saying that about the video I saw last week, the interview with Mark Zuckerberg on CBS, I think it was, with talking about Echo and how he goes in and plays with his friends and family. Yeah. And I thought, yeah, I mean, he has his own little community there. We all have our little communities. I go in Echo all the time and play Echo Arena, and so that was fun. I really loved that. I liked that a lot because that's my favorite game.
I did. I saw you giving some promotion to Mark. I'm sure he appreciates the additional push. But no, and again, if you think about that experience as well, so of course you have the core experience of playing, but there's also lobbies before and after. Something interesting happens, you want to make sure that you're sharing those experiences, and wasn't that cool? I think that is incredibly important to the experience as well, and also too helps with some of that social onboarding that we talked about a little bit already. So I think from a design standpoint, it's fantastic.
Well, that actually goes straight into the next question. That's perfect. So from a design standpoint, and you were talking about the game, like Echo Arena, for example, isn't just a sport game. I mean, that's what the game is, but you have the lobbying experience stuff. And I think of other VR games and experiences that I do that I really enjoy. And there's so many things about them that I like that make me return to them, that I like that developers can be unique and put in tricks here and there, or things that make you think, let me go back and check this out, or what new is going to be here today. But for me personally, I really do love the human contact with others. So I personally like experiences where there are other people there. And it's really funny. I think you know me well enough by now to know this is absolutely the truth. They don't have to be my same age. They don't have to be where I'm from. I really don't care. I like people. I like all people. And so it's hilarious. I'll go in and meet some, 12-year-old kid or 13-year-old kid, whatever. And from Timbuktu, and they can be doing something wrong or whatever. And I'm just like, now, wait just a minute, have you actually seen the rules over here on the wall? And they're just like, what? I mean, it's hilarious. I think you can do that and have that one personality, and then I can go in an hour later and kind of maybe act like a 10-year-old myself and play with the toys for 3 hours. And so, but what do you think personally, for you personally, and overall with your position there at Oculus, what do you think makes people want to come back, and how can developers create experiences and build their community in such a way that it not only draws people in, like we talked about earlier, but it creates retention?
Right. Before I answer that, I love your point about gentle course correction. I think in general, you'd be surprised at how much that changes people's behavior.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, maybe you didn't mean that, or maybe you're having a bad day. Let me just remind you of the rules, rather than going directly to a punishment, right? Because then that may necessarily feel unfair. So, giving people the room and space to feel their authentic selves, but providing reminders of the social norms and the rules, I think is great. I think it's fantastic. But
yeah, some people honestly don't know. I mean, they really don't. And for some people, I think VR is so amazing. For us, we go in there, we're so fascinated by it. Honestly, I've been doing this 3 years now, being in VR every day, absolutely loving it. And I'm still amazed every time I go in. I look at myself in VR and I think, wow, what a spectacular thing this is. And so if we feel that way after doing it every day, think of the new Quest user who just went in there. For some people, maybe their reaction, it's kind of like when I get nervous sometimes, I start laughing. And so, I mean, like I laugh a lot in general, but sometimes how you've done something wrong or you've said something and you just kind of like have that weird response. So sometimes I think maybe that's what those people are doing. They're so fascinated with it and they don't know the rules. And so maybe they act out, not necessarily because they're bad people, but they just don't know. So thank you for pointing that out. Yeah, too. I think it is important.
Of course. No, happy to. But to your original question, and I think, and this is going to be self-serving, so it's going to be a bit of a pitch, but making community a feature of the game or the experience. And I think we've seen a ton of people like yourself who are really interested in helping other players. So how are you thinking about connecting those folks? How are you thinking about onboarding and offboarding people once they come into the experience itself? Like, yes, a lot of games will be around competition or a shared goal, which makes a ton of sense. But, just thinking through a lot of those, some of those design elements to make sure that there is opportunity for community. I think there was something that you were talking about in one of our chats offline where you were saying, hey, what's actually great is these veteran players are able to connect with newer players and they get a real sense of accomplishment from seeing other people succeed. And if you're a newer player, be able to have someone give you some guidance without necessarily having to worry about, oh, I'm being judged, I'm being called a name is incredible. And all of that, I think, speaks to the power of community. So, really treating that as though it's another adjunct feature of your game, thinking about how, those opportunities for engagement, those opportunities for connection aligned with the overall positive nature of the community, I think can only help retention at the end of the day, especially if it feels like it's a place where players are valued and your contributions over and above the game are going to be rewarded in some way. Like it creates a really powerful loop.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's great. And in context with some of this goes back to VR esports in this particular, but also the education community. But we've had so much wonderful engagement with the people who came in and are more experienced now, going back and showing other people the way, like, training them, whether it's a Onward or Echo Arena or Space Junkies or, Smashbox Arena, whatever it is, they're coming in and training those players, which is fantastic. And with the education communities, even you have teachers who had been using VR, let's say they were using social platforms and stuff like Rumi or things like that, and they're now teaching other teachers who were thrown into a whole brand new situation they never expected in a million years, and they're passing that on. So I always tell people and encourage them, pass it on, do something good with what you've learned or what you already know. And so I think that is uniquely present right now in the VR communities, which is, it gives you chills almost. It's so spectacular. If we can just take even a tiny part of that and pass it on to humanity in general, then we'll be doing some good in the world.
I would agree. And that's what I love about our community as well is, and you hit the nail on the head, experiencing that magic moment and wanting more people to experience that magic moment once you're in headset, and just all the things that VR can bring to people. And what we're seeing right now is fantastic, but it's really only scratching the surface. So as more and more people come to the platform, we'll find more and more use cases, more and more experiences, and more and more people with which you can connect in this really, really cool environment.
Yeah, it's great. Thank you. And I'm sure our players will be happy to hear that you guys are happy with that, because every other day the esports players want to know when they're going to be able to get together again for more live events. Because as much as we love VR, it's funny, you go in there every day and you absolutely love it, but you do start making friends that you want to see in real life. I'm actually going to a camping trip in July with a few friends from VR. Is it not hilarious?
That's
like
great.
People I met in VR, we're all driving or flying to Kentucky to get together for a camping trip with our headsets. We're going to be having our headsets there, but but we can still talk in real life. It's so funny, the connections you start to make. They're very, very real. All my friends now pretty much are in VR. I go in there with them. You can touch them and be with them, and the presence in VR is so amazing. That is your community. That has become my little ecosystem of friends and people. So I'd recommend to people who are watching this, who are despondent or sad or distressed or just feeling lonely at home, whether they did before the pandemic or now in the circumstances, to just consider that is a great option that they can look into. Okay, let's move into questions real quick. We don't have a whole lot of time left.
Okay.
But, one question was regarding people with disabilities, and how can we use VR or VR games experiences, make the tech more accessible to those people, and how can we make sure that they feel welcome in our communities? And I would add to this, do we feel like they don't feel that way? Because the person who sent this question in to ask it, I would actually propose that people with disabilities or challenges, they actually feel more a part in VR communities than other communities, because VR kind of levels the playing field. I would propose that, and we haven't discussed this beforehand. What do you think about that?
I think that's a really good question back. I think, when we talk about accessibility, that's really broad. It means a number of different things. And so I think it's a really great point, because as we are trying to grow the ecosystem and get more and more people into VR, there is the attitudinal barriers that we have to cross, right? And making communities more welcoming in general, but also just making sure that, as and when people come to VR, that it's something that feels like this is for me as well, and not sort of designed elsewhere. One of the things, we talked about this a little bit in terms of engaging advocates, there are so many groups on the gaming side, folks like Able Gamers, where you have ample opportunity to engage with people, to start discussing accessibility across the board. That's just but one group, but and thinking more broadly about the experience you want to build, and then how you really lower the barrier of entry for more and more people to be able to experience it, no matter how they come into VR. I think that's incredibly important, just because we can't innately know all the various barriers there are for folks to come into VR. So as many of those perspectives as we can get, one, I think that we will innately start to become more accessible and be thinking about those things that aren't necessarily evident to us right now. But it also creates a connectedness, so that everyone knows that we're trying to make this an accessible experience across the board.
Yeah, I think that's great. And just because we haven't actually discussed this at all, but with me, when I started playing seated because, well, first of all, because I didn't know people played standing, but also because the year before I had actually been in a wheelchair. And I don't know if you've seen videos of that, but I actually wasn't walking well and stuff. And so I never felt like ever, I've always felt like it's been accessible in those circumstances, having to play seated. Well, I take that back. Actually, there have been a couple of games where I've complained to the developers, I can't play this game at all because you can't play it seated. So I will admit that, but to their credit, when you tell them that, they're like, oh, really? Okay, well, do you want to play this seated? And I'm like, yeah, I mean, why wouldn't somebody who is in a wheelchair or whatever, they want to. So I think that developers and Oculus, other people are very aware now. Yeah, people do want to do this, which, by the way, I'm actually going to play some Phantom later today, covert ops. So that's exciting. And, you know, we had last year in the VR League, we had a player who was actually in a wheelchair who made it to finals. And then we currently have a group of deaf players that are playing in the VR League, not the VR League, but the esports competitions.
Yep.
So all that's to matter, I had an email from somebody last week who had a problem. They're actually bed bound right now. They were playing Echo Arena laying in bed. So I'm not kidding you. I think that VR really, it kind of breaks a lot of those physical barriers as far as, you know, a lot of the things we consider disabilities or our disabilities. It breaks those up. For me personally, I think I've seen more as far as accessibility. It's not really accessibility issues, but with, you said something, I can't remember the words you used that made me think of this, but it's been more of prejudice type issues, which drives me insane because I do have an accent. I don't think I have an accent because I don't hear that, of course, but whenever, you know, I go into games and start hearing that sort of thing. Yeah. So I think that's not an issue that can be changed by a developer or by, like Oculus, for example. That's an issue that overall as a society, we have to change mentality, you know? Right. And right. So anyway, I got off track there, but that's kind of something to think about too, as far as accessibility. We want all people to feel welcome. That's why I was thinking that. We want all people to feel welcome. You said something to that effect, that it's not just about physical challenges or whatever, but another, you know, accents or whatever it is, but also with problems like autism. I don't know if you're aware, but we actually have several people involved in the ecosystem right now that do some pretty, you know, impressive stuff, who have autism, and they don't necessarily function well in physical reality, but within this ecosystem, they actually do incredibly well because with VR, you have different interactions in there. And so it doesn't make them feel the same nervousness and apprehension about talking to other people. So it's an absolutely fantastic way for people with autism or other disorders similar to that to be able to communicate. That's
fantastic. No, I did not know. That's great to hear.
It is. It's absolutely, we can talk about that at a different time, but it's absolutely amazing the things that they're being able to do in VR because they can communicate. Even video conferencing for them is difficult because you still have the eyes, but in VR, the interaction is more robotic. And so for them, they're being able to handle that better. So it's really great.
That's great to hear.
All right, next question. How, and that kind of goes along with it actually, how can we use VR to improve mental health? Someone sent in a question and said for flat gaming, games like Hellblade kind of address that. And so what do you think about that? They specifically wondered if there were any, sorry, now the donkey's braying again. No, last time it was the rooster, now it's the donkey. So, how can we use VR to improve mental health or in some way help those people, encourage those people?
Yeah, I think it's continuing to encourage a number of use cases across the platform. I mean, I think, you know, we see a lot of people are using it for gaming, which is great, and we've talked quite a bit about that. But I think there are a number of really, you know, interesting use cases that we're seeing, you know, certainly across Oculus, whether it's fitness or game adjacent use cases or experiences with different pace or the National Geographic type experiences. I think, you know, we're starting to see the acceleration of more of these type of experiences come to the platform. And I think more and more, as we see people engaging with them, as we see interest starting to rise, we'll be able to, you know, have more and more of these hopefully come to the platform. So I'm really excited about them. Again, it's really important. We said earlier that you're not only able to connect with the people that you want to in VR, but also the experiences you want to in VR as well. I think that becomes incredibly important as people start to more and more people start to come into VR and may like games, but are interested in things that are a little bit different. And hopefully we'll be able to give more and more of that to people.
Yeah, that's true. As far as VR community goes, maybe like we talked about education. Of course, you have the esports side of it, but this sounds terrible, I'm sure. But like some people are interested in relaxing, like yoga and stuff like that.
Very true.
So I've actually met people in VR. Sorry. You know, that's just not my thing. So
I do.
I met people who really enjoy these programs where you just go in and relax. And I guess that can be their own community. I mean, I know it is, and they really enjoy that.
100%, whether it's, going into relax, whether it's yoga, whether it's travel and exploration to be able to see places, well, one that we aren't able to see right now, but that you might not otherwise be able to go and visit. I mean, it literally opens up a world of new opportunities for folks. So we're excited to see what comes up next. Like I said earlier, I think we're only really scratching the surface. I think there are going to be a ton of these experiences that we didn't foresee, across the VR platforms as well. So, that's one of the things that keeps me excited is what's new today? What are we going to hear from either our community or see from our development partners that's going to be new or different or recapture all of that magic yet again when we put on our headset? So I can't wait.
Yeah, it's really great that you have something for everybody, quite literally. And so, you can go in there and do whatever it is that you like. And that's already, I mean, there is a lot to come. And so we know, we see that on the horizon. But what's really cool is there is already so much out there. You can pretty much have anything you enjoy doing and find not only the experience for it in VR, but a group of people that support it or are, enjoying that community. And so they can find that on Facebook, other social media and stuff. But I think that it's nice for them to connect that way. We mentioned that earlier. You want to connect in VR and the actual immersive atmosphere. But if they're looking for people to find out, ask questions and stuff, sometimes it is useful to use the other social media for that. And when I used to help build homeschool groups, we really did recommend that people create, for example, Facebook groups. This sounds like an ad for Facebook. Seriously, I don't even work for you guys, and I sound like I advertise for you. So,
Thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome. I sent you the bill. And so, but I think we really recommended that local groups, for example, what we were talking to earlier, talking about as far as having those specialized groups. You can have the big groups, you have the game developers, whatever, but then you have the special groups and specialized, so people can break out and use that however they want. I think that's incredibly useful. It's an incredibly useful tool so that people can really just enjoy one another's company. And honestly, I don't care what kind of crowd I'm in. I can be one-on-one, or I can be talking to a group of 1,000 people. It doesn't really matter to me. But some people really have preferences. Like they really want a group of 20. They don't like lots of people. And so that's important. And in VR, we have those communities as well, where you can have a group of 5 that go in together, or you can be in a lobby of, more, or something like Rec Room, Alt Space, those places where you have lots and lots of people, dozens of people. So it's pretty cool.
That is very cool.
All right. We have only a couple of minutes left, few minutes, about 5 minutes. Okay. So we talked about implementing VR in combination with education and educational opportunities. Do you want to talk about that, or do you want to actually have anything else you might like to add as far as what people are doing or where we're going with VR communities? What do you want to do for the last few minutes?
I would love to chat about education. I mean, I think that's one of the areas that is still relatively young and growing, and not only thinking about what could that mean from a curriculum standpoint, but also what could that mean from, interestingly, a coding and platform standpoint as well, just because there's so much of that work that's proliferating. In a former life, I worked at a robotics startup, and really thinking about, okay, well, what is the interesting opportunity to introduce not only a new and interesting form factor, but also a platform for coding as implemented within education as well. So not a ton right now on that front, but I do think that it's going to be something that's only going to continue to grow in the future.
Yeah, I don't know if you're aware, but I've worked some with a group in Texas, a group of students. There's a teacher there. He does summer camps and stuff, and all the students do programming. They learn how to program. That's our future developers and stuff, which I think is awesome. And I've also talked to several people. One of my big goals right now, we haven't discussed this, but I was helping promote the collegiate VR esports league and stuff, and we definitely need to continue that, but to create a ladder type system where we have the high school students now able to come in. And honestly, if we had already had some of that in place before the pandemic, they would have been able to use more of their tools at home to study with teachers. So I think in the near future and distant future, that it would be great if we can start working more towards setting up some, of the high school ecosystems, the high school communities for VR. not just with esports, but also just in general, whether it be their coding groups. Yeah, like we have clubs. You have a foreign language club. Well, you need a VR club. You need VR clubs at these schools where they can actually get together with their other friends and do that. And then not only are they connecting with them locally, they connect with other students throughout the state, and they can have their competitions, you know, once a year, and then they connect with others throughout the US or the world. And I foresee that being on the horizon. And, you know, I get impatient and I'm like, okay, well, let's do it yesterday. So,
Right.
but,
Well, no, and I love that structure. I think it's a great idea. The other point, if I could add, is, you know, just given the state of the world with COVID, we're not really sure what the new school is going to look like come fall. So, you know, anytime there's opportunity where we can supplement some of that curriculum or some of that distance learning in ways that make sense for what teachers are trying to build and the way in which students learn, I think it's going to be really interesting. But there's a lot, you know, we just don't know there yet. But you know, I'm excited for what may be possible.
Yeah, it's so exciting. There's so much. I mean, we have so many things we could still talk about. It's just thrilling. But I think that we did give a pretty good overview of VR community, what it's about, how to get there, where it's headed, what people can do to help theirs grow. Be nice to one another. It's a big thing.
Please.
So, all right. Do you have anything else, Chris?
Nothing. It's been great as always, Sonia. Thank you. Really appreciate you taking the time, and excited to see what people come up with next.
Well, thank you so much for meeting with me. That was exciting. I apologize for the lawnmower, the rooster, the braying donkey. You get to hear life in the country in Tennessee.
All right.
Awesome. All right. Thanks a lot, Chris.
Thank you. Appreciate it.